Hello, in this video, we will talk about strategy. Strategy from the perspective of leadership, because you all are students of leadership, organizational leadership. So, your goal is to be effective as leaders. So, where does strategy come into the picture? From the many classes that you have taken on leadership, you know what are the behaviors that you need to engage in to be effective leaders. But then, where does strategy come into play here? So, strategy is more on the thought aspect of leadership. It's about choices, it's about figuring out what's the best choice. So, leadership is a lot about choice, is what I would say. It's about making decisions about what is the right decision, what is the wrong decision. And when we are talking about decisions here, we are not talking of decisions in the form that we had discussed in the past, in the way of whether the decision should be taken unilaterally, like which would be autocratic kind of leadership, or should it involve the involvement of followers in form of participative leadership or consulting them, like the different levels of participation. You have been taught the Vroom-Yaton's model, for instance, how much of involvement there should be of the followers in the decision-making process. So we have touched upon decision-making through those kind of models. But when we are talking about decision-making, about leadership being a choice, where you have to make some difficult choices, we are talking about a very different kind of a thought process here. So we will, in this lecture, limit ourselves to Michael Porter's ideas of what strategy is, because it was one of the, I would say, foundational papers on strategy that profoundly changed how we thought about strategy. So that's what we will focus on, Michael Porter's view of strategy. So to put things in perspective, maybe I should start with an example. The example probably is, should I say, abstract. So you may have come across leaders who are very successful. Okay, so whichever unit that they are heading, it could be an organization, a division in an organization, it could be a country, or it could be a state, it could be anything. They could be the CEO of some major organization, or it could be they being the head of a mom and pop kind of store, owner of such a store. Either way, whatever the role that they are in, they may succeed in a big way, right? The organization that they started working with, okay, so they may take it. So this is the organization. They may take it to major big heights. They may take it to much bigger heights where the profits are much higher than what it was here. The number of customers may be much more than what they were here, and on many parameters we may see that this organization is successful, is much bigger and more money making than it was in the past. So we will typically describe this person who was leading this organization, who led it to these heights, as a successful leader. But the point is, well, yes, you took the organization from, let's say this is point X to point Y. But does it stay at this level, or does it start declining after some time? Or does it, even if it doesn't decline, but there's this, kind of plateau that it reaches? Whereas other organizations, maybe, let's say this is another organization, that also reached that height and then it continued to grow. So we see a different trajectory for this green organization, whereas this red, it reached, excuse me, those heights, but after that it plateaued or kind of started declining. So point is, it is not just enough to be successful in the short run, but it is important to make decisions that will help you succeed in the long run. So we are not talking only about long-term success. We are talking both short-term and long-term success, because if we are only thinking of the long term and ignore the short term, of course, that can be a disaster as well. If you cannot sustain in the short term and you're only thinking of the long term, that's problematic as well, right? So as a leader, as the head of such organizations, you have to make a lot of decisions. That's the kind of decisions that we are talking about in this video. What can you do so that your organization can remain competitive for the long term? That's the question. It's not just about making profits now, but competing in those markets where you can stay competitive despite new competitors coming into the fray. So what kind of decisions should you be taking? That's what we are discussing. So Porter talks about operational effectiveness. Operational effectiveness. And contrasts that with strategy. He says that these are completely different things. So when we are talking about operational effectiveness, we are talking about how to make things better. So whatever it is that we are doing, let's say I'm in the business of making bread. Okay, how can I make better breads? How can I make tastier breads? Tastier, maybe slightly cheaper, so that I get more competitors, more customers to buy my bread. Or if I am making a lot of bread, I'm not being able to supply them on time, then maybe how can I manufacture these bake these breads fast enough so that I can make them available to the customers on a timely basis. Earlier, maybe it took 8 hours to deliver the breads. Now, can I improve it to 7 hours? And so on and so forth. So the baking time, let's say, the process that I was having, that took 8-hour shifts. Can I reduce it to 6 hours so that I'll be able to bake more breads than I was before? So those are the initiatives that, as a leader, you would need to do to keep your company afloat, to keep enhancing the profit that you are making out of your bread business. But that's one aspect of the choices that you make as a leader. When we are talking about strategy, we are not talking about just streamlining the process, either the manufacturing process or how to get the employees who are on the manufacturing line be more productive. We are not talking about those things here, or we are not even talking about trying to lower the costs, trying to make the operations more efficient or less costly. We are not talking about those things. Instead, we are talking about completely different things. So we are this bread business. So what can we do so that our bread is seen and perceived as very different from all the other breads that are in the market? How can our bread be seen as completely different? So these are all very different kind of breads. Okay, our bread is seen as this unique bread that no one else has. What can we do? That would be a strategic kind of decision. And hey, we create this unique recipe that no one else has. But then if this competitor starts copying our recipe and they can also start making the same kind of bread, then we will lose that competitive advantage. So when we are talking about strategy, what we are talking about is how can we create a competitive advantage that cannot easily be copied by our competitors. Only then can we sustain that advantage for a long period of time. Only then can we sustain that advantage. Otherwise, if others can copy it, like it happens in many of the other industries, a lot of cheaper variants and of fairly good quality are available from the Chinese companies, the Chinese manufacturers, which then kill the local manufacturers. So even if earlier you had a great competitive advantage, you lose that competitive advantage if others can copy that process, then you do not have that business maybe 5 years down the lane or 10 years down the lane. So those are the kind of decisions that we are making when we are talking about strategy. So in our leadership theories, we have talked about charismatic leadership, we have talked about transformational leadership, we have talked about the importance of vision. But can we sustain this vision that we had? Can we sustain this vision? Or when we created the vision, this was maybe 10 years before, but in this span, market can change dramatically. The point when we created the vision, and let's say this is where we are currently, 10 years after, this is the present. And maybe future is somewhere 5 years into the future. Some dramatic new technology may come. Another unique bread may come that makes our bread less exciting, less interesting for customers. So can we have a strategy, a way of thinking that will keep us in that advantageous position, not just here, but here and even into the future as technology is changing, as new competitors are coming into the fray? So that's a difficult thing to achieve, right? Because we don't know. Even if we can anticipate few things about the future, about where the market is headed, but we do not know everything about the future. So a lot of unexpected technology may come, like it has happened with respect to artificial intelligence. So what can we do? There can be no fixed template, and the template, of course, will vary from industry to industry, from organization to organization, from product to product, and so on and so forth. But we can have some mental models that we as leaders could adopt that can then help us arrive at the correct decision, that can help us make the right choices about our company, about our organization. What Michael Porter says, that ultimately, when it comes to business decisions, you fight with your competitors only in 3 different ways. That's the only way you can conduct business. One is the differentiation strategy. So there are thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of different coffee shops around the country, around the world. And yet, why is it that Starbucks made it so big that the other companies did not? And coffee is a generic thing, right? You get the coffee beans. Yeah, you select the best of the coffee beans, the quality of the coffee beans, then you roast it and brew it and make coffee out of it. Okay, even some, again, all may not agree with it. Let's say Starbucks coffee, the quality is slightly better or maybe even substantially better. Let's say the generic coffee is at 80%, maybe Starbucks coffee, the quality, the taste or whatever is at 90%. But this difference in 10% does not explain for the huge, humongous difference in market share, in market value that small coffee shops have with Starbucks, right? So even for a generic product like coffee, what decisions were made that differentiated Starbucks coffee from all the other coffees? And can that difference be sustained also over a long period of time? That then is what we are talking about, is the differentiation strategy. How do you differentiate your business from others, other competitors? Which means then you have to be very innovative. There are so many cell phone companies. Why is it that the Apple cell phone has so higher a market share than other companies? Was it first in the market? Yes, maybe in some ways the first iPhone was in some ways unique, even though touchscreen Phones were available even before iPhone came in, but it provided some unique product that wasn't available before. But the competitors soon caught up, right? There are so many manufacturers of cell phones, and some are technologically even more advanced, better than Apple's iPhones. And yet, Apple, even though it is declining, it still has a much higher market share than all these other manufacturers. Other manufacturers have cool technology in terms of foldables or whatever. So, what can you as the leader do to differentiate your product, your company from others? And how do you differentiate in a way that other companies cannot easily copy? Even if they copy some aspect of it, they cannot copy everything. So the uniqueness and the value that your product provides to the customers is retained, and that's how you sustain that competitive advantage. We will discuss this in greater detail in my class, but this is just an overview of what we are talking about. Then the other strategy that Porter talks about is the cost leadership. And I think the best example of that is Walmart. There are tons of stores, but the way Walmart has consolidated the way it procures the products from different manufacturers and keeps the operations so streamlined that it is being able to sell products at a much cheaper price than many of the other competitors. There are other stores, let's say Target. Maybe some of those products are of better quality than what is sold in Walmart. But Walmart succeeded or has succeeded to a large extent in keeping the prices low. And that's the reason people continue to flock to Walmart. So even if you cannot create a product or if you cannot provide something that is unique, that is dramatically different from what the competitors are providing, that strategy was the differentiation strategy. Even if you cannot do that, can you streamline your operations so well that you provide the maximum amount of value to your customers, a maximum value at the lowest possible cost? And if you do it in a way that no other competitors can do. So they do provide value, but not at the same low cost. Or if they bring the cost low, then they are not providing value. They are like broken products. So if you are being able to provide this value versus cost, this value over cost, this fraction, if it continues to stay higher than that of the competitors, and the business decisions you make in a way that others cannot copy it, then you have competitive advantage. So these are the kind of choices we are talking about when we are talking about strategy. The last point that Porter talks about is focus strategy. So this is more of a niche kind of strategy. For instance, in Fort Wayne here, there are so many restaurants. Some of them are extremely successful, doing great business. Some of them are chains. Some of them are local shops. They have no intentions of expanding their operations to other markets, like, for instance, McDonald's did, or McDonald's at one point started small, right? But then they expanded, or KFC did. So they have no such intention. This is, let's say, a small mom and pop kind of shop, and they are happy being this small mom and pop shop. But they do their business in such a way that they stay attractive to the local market. So the local customers, they continue to flock to this restaurant. They provide something very unique again, something very unique that none of the other restaurants provide. It could be in form of food, it could be in form of ambience, it could be some cuisine that no other restaurant provides. Nonetheless, that's a focus strategy. You are focusing on a small business, Of course, this is an extreme example when I'm talking about a mom and pop shop. It could be slightly bigger. Even in technology, for instance, you may focus on a specific technology that no other competitor does, right? For instance, I believe the glass that is used on the cell phones, it's a specific kind of glass that can be prepared by one specific manufacturer, I believe in Germany. There are so many glass manufacturers all over the world, but they have mastered a technology in a way that the properties of the glass, of it not being easily scratchable and it being extremely durable, and at the same time being able to conduct not the electricity but your touch sensitivity in a way that it functions very optimally. That's the business that they have focused on. So it's a niche business, but something that they have the expertise in, that no one else has. And they're happy being restricted to that business. But since that technology or their way of doing things is so unique, so advanced that no one other can copy it as effectively, they then continue to stay in the market for a long period of time. So that's essentially what we are talking about when we are talking about strategy, when we are talking about strategic thinking. We are not talking about just doing things better than your competitors, than your rivals. We are talking about doing things differently or making a conscious decision of doing only this aspect of business, which also means that you are making a conscious decision of not doing several things, right? Let me take a sports analogy. So I hope you are familiar with the Rocky series of movies, the Sylvester Stallone movies, where he is a boxer and he fights with various competitors. I'm forgetting if it was Rocky 4 or 5, where he goes to Russia to fight with a Russian competitor, boxer. I'm forgetting the character's name there, Drago or something. But he goes and trains for that fight in a very different way than most common boxers do, including the Russian boxer. So the training regimen of Rocky, of Stallone, is so unique, so different from that of the competitors. Of the competitor is what ultimately helps Rocky win the match. That training regimen is unique. That is not something that others were doing. So that's what provided Rocky the competitive advantage. So you are doing things differently, not just doing more. So let's say these are two boxers, okay? One does 100 reps of something. So I want to be better than him, so I will do 110. So we are not just talking about doing more, okay? But we are talking about doing things differently so that we will have competitive advantage over my competitor. So that's the kind of thing that we are talking about. And it could also mean figuring out our strengths and making decisions of where to fight and where not to fight, or where to compete, where not to compete. Another movie that I'm forgetting the name of, I think it was called Cool Runnings. Cool Runnings. It was a movie from the 90s. I'm forgetting the actors and actresses in the movie, but it's supposedly based on a real team. But these are Jamaican athletes who failed to qualify in the Summer Olympics. Jamaica, of course, as you know, is a hot country, because it is a tropical region, so they do not have snow or anything. But these were great athletes who failed to qualify for the Summer Olympics. But they had trained so much. So what do they do now? Should they give up because the other summer athletes coming out of Jamaica were so much better that they could in no way compete? So should they give up on their dream of participating in the Olympics? They decided, no, we will do something very different based on our strengths. As I think they were runners or whatever the athletes. I'm forgetting the details now. They find out a sport in the Winter Olympics, where I'm forgetting what that sport is called, but they have to lug a sled to the top of a mountain and then slide back. and they have to do it as a team. So they figure out a sport in this Winter Olympics where they can compete. And there were, of course, no winter sport competitors coming out of Jamaica to participate in that sport because, of course, winter is not a thing in Jamaica. So there were no Jamaican competitors in that area. So they figured out where to compete in a very unique way that then helps them participate in the Olympics. So the example is supposed to help you understand where to compete. So you want to compete on your terms, on your turf, as opposed to competing in an arena or an area where your competitors have greater advantage. So those are the kind of decisions that we are making when we are talking about strategy. So hopefully this gives you some initial insights about what strategy is, and we will discuss this in greater detail. Thank you.